Alright, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of The Adventures of the Monk and the Monarch, featuring me, the Monarch, and our local monk, Mildra.
Hello!
Now, when we get into our topic today, it's about time we sail the high seas and talk some piracy. Obviously, this is probably going to extend to a bit more than just anime, but we'll try to keep it at least mostly focused there. And before we get into that, as per our format, let's discuss what we've been watching this past month.
I, in the last few days, decided to jump in on something that just came out for once, and I have been looking at Bastard, Heavy Metal Dark Fantasy. Now, this is not my first rodeo with Bastard. I've read through the manga, and I remember watching the OVAs way back in the day. I am watching it on sub. I'm not watching it dub, but I'm a few episodes in, and I've enjoyed the fact that this is completely unrepentant in what it is. It knows that it's not too far removed from an exploitation cinema and revels in that fact. And for somebody who listens to a whole lot of metal, this is also a big scavenger hunt of spot the reference.
Recording starting again. I know, I'm just here completely killing everyone's flow for no good reason.
Continuing what I said, I know a lot of people like to bring up JoJo when it comes to music references in works, but for me, the two big cases that I always invoke are Bastard and, to a bigger extent, Guilty Gear. And just to use a couple examples, one of the main characters in Bastard is named Dark Schneider, which is an obvious nod to Udo Dirkschneider, the frontman for Accept. One of his signature spells is called Venom, and Venom was the band that basically was the patient zero for black metal. And that's just a few examples. And if you look at the Guilty Gear series, you'll see a lot of musical references, including, well, for the longest time, everybody's name, but that's kind of been dialed back in the last few games.
Now, while I'm not really too familiar with the Guilty Gear games, I am familiar with the original Bastard anime. That I kind of love just some of that 80s violent schlock, basically. The show definitely knew what it was back in the day. It was just violence over the top and great.
This particular adaptation feels like a remake from back then that was cryogenically frozen and somebody unfroze it and cleaned it up. At least so far. I haven't seen anything that veers off too much. I'm sure if I really wanted to dig, I might be able to find some differences, but the key thing is that if I'm looking for differences, I'd rather it be differences that actually matter. If there was a slight line change due to a different translation, that's not all that important in the grand scheme of things unless it's sufficiently egregious. I'm not a purist, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I think in the case of Bastard, you kind of have to keep it as close to that original intent as you can, because, the show's named Bastard.
Mm-hmm.
The main character, at least from what I recall from the original, is not the most likable character in a lot of ways. I really love him.
There's a reason I said protagonist, not hero.
Yeah. But yeah, I've been waiting until that whole one comes out, because, I was shocked that it actually look this good. The whole season's already out. Oh, it is? Wow,
This was on Netflix, so they dumped the whole season in one go.
Oh, right, Netflix does that. I'm still not used to things doing that, alright? I'm still old school in mentality where it's every week we get a new episode.
I'm not a fan of dumping whole seasons, but that's the model that they've chosen, so It is what it is.
So I'm gonna have to sit down and watch that in these next few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So other than that, I know both of us in the meantime have actually sat down and watched The Spine of Night.
Yeah, which once again, I know some people would go, why are you bringing up The Spine of Night? That's not anime. Which, technically speaking, that is true. It is still animation, so I'm still going to count it.
I'm not too picky about that. Now, I will say, from my initial reaction, just from those stills and, screenshots I saw before watching it, just, for the most part, the visuals are just fantastic in that movie. Open to end, the violence is great, a lot of great detail on just the blood and gore. It's also
rare that you see rotoscoping.
Yeah, it's been so long. I will say, though, sometimes, there are action scenes in that movie where the animation feels odd, and I can't quite put my finger on why. Like any like still image or shot or background all looks fantastic. Just when like actual fighting starts, it looks weird.
I see this as this is something that I remember people saying about Fire and Ice. I think it's an issue with with trying to do animated action in rotoscope because of the fact that you're familiar with how rotoscoping works, right?
Oh yeah, not like all the gritty details of it, but yes.
Well, when you're doing that and effectively having models move around at a certain pace, the way an action scene is set up to go very fast, they can't utilize that as a reference properly.
I can see that being the issue.
Especially since you're having people move frame by frame. It's also a very time consuming process. I think that's part of the reason why you don't see it done as often.
The only other thing of note I thought is I think like the voice acting is a little all over the place in terms of how good it is. I know they got Patton Oswalt in on this. I forget the name of the guy he voiced, but I just hear Patton Oswalt. He just doesn't sound like he fits in with half the other voices.
Yeah, he was Lord Puritan in it.
That said, I really liked whoever it was that voiced like the lead character in The Guardian. They sounded amazing.
The Guardian was voiced by Richard E. Grant, and Tazad was voiced by Lucy Lawless.
Yeah, they did fantastic. Like I had no issues with their performance the entire time. You had a couple though that were like Patton that just didn't feel like it belonged here. Normally, I like Patton Oswalt and stuff.
And the other thing to consider is rotoscoping has a much lower frame rate. Usually, most animated films are going to have probably around 25 frames per second. Sometimes 30 if you're lucky. Most rotoscoping projects are animated at 12 frames per second.
Yeah, I can definitely see that having an impact on the action.
A lot of the decisions that they did was as a tribute to the rotoscoped fantasy works of the 70s and 80s.
Well, they managed to do a really good job with it, I think. I still think the action is a little bit distracting at times, but overall I still really enjoyed the movie. I didn't find it, like, horrifying or anything. Like, I wasn't scared at any point. But I don't know if that was really the intent, so...
Even though distribution was handled by Shudder, who tends to focus on horror works, I don't consider this a horror work. Dark fantasy, yes. Horror, not really.
Same time, like, who else really would have grabbed that movie? Like, I think it fits in well enough on Shudder.
Yeah.
Don't see Amazon picking that one up, or Netflix, despite some of the weird stuff they've grabbed before.
Oh, with Netflix has no standards when it comes to what they'll grab. I think Amazon likes to think they have standards, but they don't have as many standards as they think.
Yeah, I've come across some weird stuff on there that I'm like, why would you pay for these rights? But that's an entirely different discussion right there. Other than that, I did finish Spy Family. I think my original statement stands. Like, this is an incredibly stupid show in a lot of ways, but that's to the show's benefit. Like, I laughed the whole time. I think the Twilight is effectively the main character of the show is great. Not much to add from last time I brought it up, other than, yeah, it's worth watching. I hope the next season expands characters beyond just Twilight a bit more. Otherwise, good season. Anything else you've been watching this past month?
Because of the fact that I'm doing this for research on a certain project, I have, and once again I'm cheating, but I have been watching a fair bit of Kamen Rider Amazons. Specifically rewatching season 1 and taking notes. Putting aside the lameness of them using that name because this was exclusively on Amazon.
Oh god, the naming gimmick.
Do not go into this expecting a lot of the things you come to expect with Heisei Rider. This is a far more violent affair.
Now, do you need to watch much of the other Kamen Rider stuff to be able to get into Amazon? Or is this something you can just jump into?
No, the vast majority of Kamen Rider series are self-contained.
That's good to hear. Some really long-running shows don't do the best job of that.
No, for something like this, each season is its own thing.
That's good. I might have to check that out soon once I catch up on everything else. Especially with Bastard, I think I'm running a little bit behind now.
Well, now that you know that the whole thing is out.
Yeah. Though if you think you're cheating, I've watched Sonic the movie or Sonic the Hedgehog finally. Just the first live-action movie. Yeah, I see why a lot of people really like that movie. It's really good. In hindsight, I don't know why I thought Jim Carrey would have been a bad choice for Robotnik, because the movie's basically a live-action cartoon. People act more like you would expect a cartoon character to react than an actual person. In this context, of course Jim Carrey was going to make a good Robotnik. He's a living cartoon already.
What's to the benefit of someone like Carrey is the fact that Carrey, for better or worse, is a method actor.
Yeah, I know the weird stories about some of his behind-the-scenes shenanigans.
And method actors are a few eggs short of a picnic. I'll phrase it like that anyways.
Yeah. All I said, it's not a movie I think you really need to go, in-depth on discussing. It knows exactly what it is. It's a Sonic movie.
Yeah.
And it was better than I ever would have expected a live-action Sonic movie to be. The ways this could have went wrong.
Because you probably saw the original trailer just like I did.
From what I understand, even they make fun of that in the next movie, but we'll see when I get around to watching it.
If they didn't get bullied by the internet, it would have just come and went. But instead, the popularity of the film has kind of had a domino effect with other matters.
Yeah.
Also the fact that both Sonic movies were able to pants a superhero movie that came out the same month.
There are two other things I've watched. I'll get to the One Piece discussion here in a second. Probably save that before we go into our actual piracy discussion. It seems fitting. But randomly, just on my recommendeds on Amazon, I was recommended Legend of the Millennium Dragon. Have you ever seen or heard of this one?
No.
Alright. So I can't really describe, I can't even hint at the major problem with this movie without spoiling it. That's it. It came out in 2011, so 11 years ago. I will timestamp this when I get the description up for everybody. Just so you know when you can jump if for some reason you want to watch this and don't want this spoiled. So, spoilers will start right now. I have never come across a villain plot that was this horrifically stupid. In the past, there's a fight going on between a bunch of Japanese samurai and whatnot and the Oni. You find out the Oni are actually just people wearing these masks that give them this otherworldly appearance. And for some reason, them and the samurai are at odds with each other. Now, to combat the Oni, the guy who's the villain of the show, Ganoon, goes to the future and grabs a descendant of it's some clan. I would probably butcher the name were I to try to say it. The Magatama clan. That was it. Because for some reason, none of the Magatama that are even alive now are able to control Orochi. The big seven-headed, seven-eyed dragon.
Not
maybe
seven, eight.
Right, 8. It's not the point, but yes, 8 heads, 8 wings, all that good stuff. And he wants to use the power of Orochi to inevitably wipe out the Oni. Firstly, he's just assuming that this kid's going to side with him, having just pulled him in for no reason, or pulled him in to fight. He's just assuming this kid is going to be on his side. Here's where the real problem comes in. He's already got the upper hand on the Oni. He is strong enough to basically wipe out an entire group of them on his own. And his side already has way more numbers than the Oni have. That's problem 1. Problem 2. He still has the ace card of summoning in the 4 heavenly kings, which, when that does happen, the Oni clearly have no way to counter this. At all. There is nothing they could do to stop the 4 kings. And this is before you find out he can then absorb their power into himself. He already had this entire thing won, and he literally brings the one thing into the equation that can stop him. I don't know why he does this. He literally just shoots himself in the foot and costs himself the victory for absolutely no reason. I liked everything else about this movie, and then that happened, and I hate it now. There was something about, Orochi can control water, and he can now create his eternal paradise because he controls the water for some reason. There's not a water shortage in the world. No one's gonna stop him from controlling the water anyway without Orochi there because, well, there's no one that can stand up to him.
I don't know. I don't know. You've done a really good job pitching it to me as glorious stupidity.
Like, if the whole movie was just this stupid, I don't think it would have bothered me. But it just all comes crashing down in one moment towards the end when you realize how bad this plan was. Like, at least if the Oni had something that could have stood up to the Four Heavenly Kings bit, even at some kind of great cost or sacrifice, I could understand. But they didn't. So, just so this isn't me ranting more about how stupid this all is, was there anything else you've watched?
There's a few things here and there, but nothing that would qualify for this.
Guess then that just leaves the last thing I watched through was I finally made it through the Water 7 arc in One Piece. The one that introduces Frankie to the crew. This is now my favorite One Piece arc up till this point. I've kind of had an off and on issue with One Piece where the plots kind of seem to move forward sometimes through sheer stupidity of a few of the characters, usually Luffy and Zoro. It doesn't really happen in Water 7 at all, which was nice for me. Nico Robin is now my favorite member of the Straw Hats, finally supplanting Sanji.
Oh, join the club on that front.
Yeah. I loved her since she joined the group, but this was the arc that just kind of solidified her for my favorite right now. Like, there's still I'm only like 263 episodes in. There's plenty of time for that to change.
It probably won't. Call it a hunch.
I don't know, I still love Sanji. He's still my boy. I'm really liking Frankie. I wasn't sure at first. But then he got in that fight on the train top, where you find out, like, his backside isn't cybernetic at all. And the moment I started to think about it, I'm like, this fight's going to a standstill, and he just lays down on his back, isn't he? 5 seconds later, he lays down on his back, and the other guy just stops, like, I don't know what to do. I can't hurt you now. The fight just comes to a glorious halt.
There's always been a small part of me that wonders if Eiichiro Oda had ever read any of Terry Pratchett's novels.
Pratchett. Which one was he?
Discworld.
Okay. I'm excited for the following arc when they go into the prison place. Annis Island, I think it was.
Close enough.
Yeah. But yeah, if I were ever to do another top 20 anime of all time, I would probably end up slotting One Piece in there now that I've finally started watching it. It's one of the few of those old anime that I've gotten around to watching that I think really does live up to a lot of the hype. Now, I'm still expecting there to be some stupid arcs that come up in the future. I've come across some of them already. But it's still going strong after all this time, and there's still a lot of people that really love it, so not a lot of shows can say that. Without a whole lot else to discuss on that front, then I think we should probably jump into discussing the topic of piracy now.
Yeah, I want to make the official attitude that I've had in the monastery regarding piracy is, on the record, is we do not condone it unless you absolutely have to. I find something kind of amusing where there's two particular camps. I won't say sides, but camps in the matter. On one hand, you have the people who are absolutely black and white on the matter. No piracy whatsoever. You must support only the official release and nothing else. And then there are the people who actually understand the bigger picture. If it sounds like I'm throwing shade at the people who constantly shout, "Please support the official release," it's because a lot of the people who say that haven't had to deal with a situation where they'd like to, but they fucking can't.
You're like, what was it? Devolver Digital with Hotline Miami 2, like, they were not able to release that in Australia. And they straight said when someone brought it up to them on Twitter, like, look, we know you can't get it down there. If you pirate it, we don't care. Go nuts.
When G2A was still a threat for indie devs, a lot of indie devs outright stated they would rather someone pirate their game than get it off of G2A.
That was that whole scam code thing, right? One of them, at least. I think there were a few.
No.
Oh, what was G2A then?
G2A was a key seller for PC games.
Oh yeah.
But they had no quality standards, and everybody pretty much knew that they were being used for scams and chargebacks. because they weren't vetting the people who were setting up accounts on their site.
Now, whether that was intentional on their part or not is a little beside the point.
Because of how long it went,
Yeah.
I think that they were looking the other way because of how much money was coming in and out of their system through a lot of those scams.
Yeah. Intent or not, they were likely complicit.
Yeah. And this was during that nadir period where a lot of Steam was being flooded with asset flips that were designed just to generate cards for cards selling.
Yeah, people have found weird ways to abuse some of these systems.
Just to use a few examples of, because there are plenty of great anime out there. Either the physical release is long since out of print, or the physical release is technically available, but it's ridiculously expensive. A lot of anime from that was published by ADV back in the 2000s up through the 2010s and a little bit of the 90s qualifies for this. While some of them did get picked up on certain streaming services, especially when Retro Crush came along, there's still a lot that's gotten lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, and that's a big point. I come down on it too. Is I'm very big on preservation, and right now, piracy is the only way a lot of stuff is getting preserved for like just the future. And honestly, like I know people are all big big on like saying physical releases. You have to have physical releases if you want this to be preserved. But I'm like,
physical releases can degrade.
Yeah, eventually they're all going to deteriorate, and yeah, we obviously can't trust these companies to keep this code going forever. I mean, I know ages ago there was that weird story where like the Sega devs didn't have the source code for one of the Sonic games and ended up getting it from some random guy on Reddit.
You want a better example of what happens when you don't preserve?
Sure.
Silent Hill HD.
I'm actually not sure what happened with that one. I was never big on Silent Hill.
Konami wanted to do an HD take on Silent Hill that would have 1, 2, and 3 on one disc for the PS3. The problem was they lost the source code. So the people they contracted to handle this idea had to work with a retail copy backwards.
Oh, joys.
Which is why that thing was such a buggy mess. And of course, if I need to use an even bigger example of preservation woes and the lengths to try and restore lost media, let's bring up Doctor Who and the fact that there are still dozens of episodes missing.
And what are the chances like we actually have good copies of them sitting around anywhere that aren't just like something someone recorded on their TV and uploaded somewhere?
That depends. Are you willing to go into a political hot zone in order to get it?
No.
Because there was one case where somebody announced that where it was preemptively announced that they may have found one at an old BBC station in Sierra Leone. But the problem with announcing that kind of thing is if you draw attention to yourself when you're in a political hotspot like that, you can get yourself into a lot of trouble, up to and including getting shot at.
Over Doctor Who.
It's less about that and more about the fact that for all intents and purposes you're in a war zone. But for less crazy examples, consider the fact that Persona 4 the animation is really good. You're gonna have to pay out the ass to get a DVD or Blu-ray copy of it right now. Same thing goes with Karas, which is one of the best animated projects of the early 2000s. Like if you want to get DVDs of that, you're really gonna have to pay out the ass, or maybe hope that you get lucky. The copy that I have is one that I happened to stumble upon when I was at Anime Detour years ago. I consider it nothing more than blind, dumb ass luck that I got it.
Again, this extends to way more than anime. Like,
oh yeah,
like one of my favorite Saturday morning cartoons of all time came out like at the end of that being a thing anymore. Was Fillmore. I don't know if you ever saw Fillmore.
I think I saw a few episodes.
It's amazing. Even pirating it, you only get like stuff people recorded off TV, so you still got like the weird logos in the bottom, some kind of stuff popping up about upcoming shows, because it never got a VHS or DVD release. It's never been made available for download anywhere except in Germany on iTunes, apparently. You can download it. Which I'm shocked it's Germany that gets it, because every episode is effectively a reference to like some kind of 80s cop action or thriller movie, but done as basically a hall patrol in middle school. Yeah, that show just doesn't exist in any legal way to obtain it right now.
I do remember. I remember when it came to Kamen Rider Dragon Knight, one of the actors officially endorsed a torrent that had the whole series. Due to some external factors, a DVD release was not going to be possible. And at that point, when you're in that kind of position, it's more of what's more important: people going with an official release, or people just watching it and being able to enjoy it.
Can't get an official release, then yeah, let people just enjoy it how they want.
Of course, there's also the fact that when it comes to video games and piracy, there are some cases of piracy out of protest for certain aspects, like say DRM and especially de novo.
God, I wish Square Enix would stop putting de novo on their Steam releases. Some stuff I'd like to get, but I'm not touching that.
It doesn't take First off, it doesn't take long for de novo to get cracked. It's not nearly as secure as people think it is.
Haven't historically several of the games it's been cracked in less than 24 hours? I'm pretty sure that's happened with a lot of de novo releases.
It certainly has. I'd also say an example of the issue is the really obtrusive DRM that was in Borderlands 3 that was effectively making a virtual machine within your computer.
That one I missed entirely.
I remember when I got Kingdoms of Amalur, I freely admit that I ended up getting a cracked version of it simply because I didn't want to install Origin on my computer.
Way too many companies are trying to get you to sign up for their service just to play the game. It's getting ridiculous.
With a lot of games, I'm pretty sure people would like to purchase them, but the resale market for them makes them far too unreasonable, and there isn't an official thing. Like, say, consider the original Need for Speed Most Wanted. Even to this day, at the cheapest, you'd probably be paying about $40 for a in-generation copy. You'd be paying quite a bit, and it's probably gone up with price. When, truth be told, something like that should be like $20 by this point, especially given how well it's sold. I know that there was that in Most Wanted by Criterion, but that's not nearly the same. Especially since part of the appeal with Most Wanted was the cheesy-ass cutscenes. And Criterion's take on Most Wanted didn't have any of that. So you can't say that it's good enough because it ain't. If it was, you wouldn't need to say it.
Kind of sad we're at a point in gaming where a lot of people are sitting there, alright, what is the next bullshit thing people are going to start adding to these games that are going to make people not want to buy them? What other ridiculous anti-piracy are about to come next?
That is a mindset. I always advise caution with that line of thinking, because it's very easy to go into full-on cynicism and act like the entire game development scene is doomed. That's the reason why I did that stream on my channel, covering how there's plenty of really good and really promising games that are either in development or already out.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of stuff I'm excited for.
That don't do this kind of thing.
Like, what is it? I'll probably get that new Square Enix game, Harvestella, I think it was. Their take on Rune Factory, basically.
Rune Factory was never my thing, and I doubt that project is going to be my thing either.
Like, I'm hoping it gets a Switch release, just because, well, the PC release is probably going to have de novo like all their other stuff, but that doesn't come out on their console stuff.
That's going to get cracked.
Yeah,
that's gonna get cracked in days. I'll have found out when it got cracked because I keep an eye on these kind of things.
Yeah. But that's why I'm hoping it comes out on like Switch, because their console stuff doesn't have the de novo on it.
Wait, are you saying that you wouldn't be willing to get to set up a crack fix if you got it on PC?
Well, no, that I'd probably do, but if it's only available on PC, if I have time, I'd probably hunt down and get a cracked version.
It's not that hard.
Yeah, I know. I'm lazy, though. I'm not that excited for it. Like, if it was a game I really wanted to play and it was only available with the stupid anti-piracy, yeah, I'll get a cracked version and wait until they either remove it so I can just buy it normally, or just
Funny thing
not buy it
is,
normally.
the companies that actually use Denuvo these days are in a minority in the grand scheme of things, especially with the advent of GOG, and GOG has a
Yeah.
very strong anti-pirate, has a very strong anti-Denuvo and
Yeah.
DRM attitude.
I think it was
Um,
Harada that just started blasting them on Twitter. Just when he said, "Yeah, no, this moment our game was running like shit on PC. We pulled out Denuvo. It started running perfectly fine." He was just openly and just blatantly blasting it, and just was not happy with him. So I don't think Denuvo is going to be a thing for a lot longer, which that is nice to hear.
but truth be told, when it comes to both, I've gotten on the bad side of a few voice actors because they did the whole don't pirate. There was one person who claimed that a show that they worked on didn't get a second season because of piracy, which I find very hard to believe. And that brings me to my next point, and that is piracy being treated as a boogeyman, a problem that, exacerbating a problem using hysterics.
Like, I am sure to a degree piracy has probably hurt some sales, but I don't believe it's to the extent people make it out to be.
No, in fact, my good friend Zan has demonstrated that it most certainly is not nearly as damaging as a lot of people think.
I will say though, I still find it hilarious that the people who run Crunchyroll have been so actively anti-piracy. I'm like, they realize they're Crunchyroll, right? Like, they know how they started. They were not legit at the beginning.
I think the people who work there don't know.
I mean, it's possible, but the people who are running it have to know. If they don't, then I don't really know what to say to that. You know where your company came from.
I think I wouldn't be surprised if in that company culture that there's been some scrubbing, much in the same way that Batman fans claimed that Batman was always grimdark. He wasn't.
There are some goofy fucking Batman comics.
I'll just look at anything that came out of the Silver Age, but I digress.
Yeah.
the The point that I'm getting at is I think on the business end of things, using piracy as a boogeyman is it seems to be frequently used as a get out of responsibility free card in some cases, i.e., if say subscriptions are down, it's because of pirates, or more recently in the case of Netflix, it's because of people account sharing, which is a complete 180 from the position they had on account sharing a year ago. But that's beside the point.
Yeah, it's easier to blame the pirates than to admit maybe you're fucking up on something.
When it comes to this in the anime sphere, there's plenty of anime that would not have gotten popular if it weren't for fan subs. And I'm including Haruhi in that. Whether people want to admit it or not, fan subs and the like are a crucial part of the ecosystem. Some things that go into it are going to catch on. Some things are not.
Yeah, there's a lot of shows that never would have seen the light of day had some fan not decided to do the subbing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, that extends a lot, like, way beyond just anime. Like, I don't know if we'd have, like, a Live Alive HD coming out were it not for how popular that game got just back in the day because of the people who translated it and just made those ROM patches.
Oh, we probably wouldn't have gotten a proper release of Final Fantasy V through Anthology if it weren't for fan translations.
Yeah, like, they can say what they want about the pirates, but it's the only way we've gotten a lot of stuff in the West that we never would have gotten otherwise. Like, I'm still hopeful that we eventually get a HD release of Bahamut Lagoon.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of works that, for one reason or another, as we mentioned before, haven't gotten a US release.
There's also the shame, like, there's inevitably, like, games in anime that we'll never see over here because, honestly, they probably aren't going to have a big enough audience to justify a company buying the rights, doing the translation, putting out a release for it, and so you'll just probably never see them. And the only way the people who would enjoy it are going to get a chance to is through piracy.
That ties into the reason why I have such a I guess, antagonistic attitude towards the voice actors who have that black and white approach.
I think they're
Because
just worried about their own bottom line rather than thinking about
well,
anything beyond
they
that.
already got paid.
Yeah,
So I don't know what their fuss is about.
maybe they're just worried like if piracy keeps catching on, like they just won't get as much work. Like, well, people are gonna pirate and fan sub it. There's no need to pay these voice actors for something. I think that's what their
Um,
worry is.
I think if I'm being honest, because of the boys club mentality in certain dubbing circles, I think what's if there's one thing I think a lot of them are really worried about is if, say, let me use an example in some recent events over the last year. For the light novel end of things, Kadokawa has started to do English translations in house.
Yeah.
And when that dropped, I had said that Funimation and the like are probably really spooked at that prospect, because if that takes off, what's to stop them from looking at their deals with dubbing companies and going, why the hell are we paying you when we can do it ourselves?
And especially if it manages to succeed over here. Like, I don't know how well the light novels are doing now that they're doing that. It's not a sphere I've ever really kept up on.
It's not numbers that I'm able to access, so I wouldn't be able to say
Yeah.
positively or negatively.
It's one of those things, like, if it succeeds, like, I think we'll know if it was a success or not, because they're probably going to start doing more and more things like that. If it fails horribly, well, I guess we'll be able to figure that out too in due time.
Mm-hmm.
If that starts working out for Kadokawa, there's a lot of people here in the West that are going to be hurting for a job soon.
Now, that being said, I do have to call out some of the extreme measures that Japan has taken to try and combat manga piracy. Ironically enough, in one case, they tried to pick a fight with Cloudflare. Except there's one small problem with that. Cloudflare isn't headquartered in Japan.
Yeah.
There's a certain irony that they'd want to get on people for breaking the law while trying to break the law in the process.
It's one of those things. I think they get a little too defensive of Japanese companies when more often than not they're doing stuff that's just as head scratching or infuriating as Western companies. Sometimes it's different things, but
the analogy I like to use is that there's shit in everyone's yard. And I understand why, because where the real money is made is in manga. A lot of times anime is used as a glorified advertisement for manga, which is where the real money is made. And because of that, I can see why there'd be that aggressive posture. Although certain companies are just way too aggressive on protecting their IP, even especially since Japan does not have a fair use doctrine or some equivalent, which is why you get companies like Toei trying to pick fights with YouTubers, even though it's the dumbest thing ever, because said YouTubers are giving your products free advertisement.
I understand certain American companies doing something like that because there's a degree of, if you're not actively defending your copyrights and trademarks, when you go after one person for doing it, and they go like, well, here's this long list of other people that were doing it immediately before me, and that actually can hinder their case, even if it's a legitimate one. That, of course, is speculation.
I want to make clear that when it comes to piracy, my attitude is very pragmatic. Especially since in some cases it's a response to a situation. And no matter how much anti-piracy you do, some people are just going to do it anyways because they feel like it. And while those people are in the minority, you're not going to get rid of them.
I'm largely in that same camp, but again, I also like a lot of things like those weird Pokemon game hacks, where they'll go in and just completely redo a lot of aspects of the game. I also love things like that. But that's not pragmatic. That's really not a preservation thing. But I'm still in favor of it.
There's been when it came to copyright, there's been a long debate about sampling when it comes to music. Is sampling, especially in, say, hip hop, a violation of copyright? Like whether it be sampling a beat from someone else's music, or sampling a voice clip or something like that, or even mixing a bunch of samples together and creating something new in the process.
Like, by and large, I'm entirely okay with that. I don't know how that technically works out for copyright law.
It's one of the
Yeah.
one of those things that's taken on a case by case basis from what I understand of it.
Yeah.
The defining line is are you creating something new? So if somebody's using a bunch of tracks from different songs and creating a whole new song out of it, that would be borderline, but depending on how it's set up, it could be argued that it counts.
Yeah. That's getting into like the legality of it though, and I am not a lawyer. I know whether or not I'd be okay with it.
Neither am I, but
Yeah.
but I have done a whole lot of studying because, well, that's what I do. I do think that if you really that certain voice actors and the like who keep playing the shame game when it comes to this sort of thing should really stop making black and white hot takes on the matter, because when you do that, you're treating your customer base as sinners in waiting, and that's a good surefire way to get someone good pissed off.
Probably just make him go, you know what, fuck it, I will pirate it. Just out of spite.
Never underestimate spite as a muse.
I may or may not have done that once or twice in the past.
Oh, I know that I have, especially if there's some online consistency I don't want to deal with.
I did that with Spore, and I never even intended to buy Spore in the first place. I don't even remember why I was pissed off at Spore and what... Well, I mean, it's EA. They did something at the time to piss people off, I'm sure.
It's EA. Do you have any idea how little that narrows it down?
I know. But I said I don't even remember why people were mad in relation to Spore. I'm like, I wasn't even planning to play that game. They pissed me off, so I still downloaded it, cracked it, never actually played it.
I think for some, I can easily see people using it as a way to test out a certain game or test out a certain series to see if they actually want to invest in it instead of flying blind.
I miss the days where demos were more of a thing. Like, they still are around sometimes, but not as much as I would otherwise like.
To be honest, even when demos were a thing, that still wasn't a guarantee, because there were still dozens upon dozens upon dozens of games at my LGS that didn't have a demo, so you're flying slightly less blind, but slightly less blind is like lipstick on a pig.
Yeah, I still do wish they'd do more demos, though. I like the idea that I can just download the demo, try it out. You don't have to go through the hassle of pirating to figure anything out about the game.
There's also the fact that a bad demo or a beta, which a lot of betas are glorified demos as it is, can cause damage. The demo for Kingdoms of Amalur was using an early build, and it was not good, and that may have been a factor in why that game didn't sell as well in its initial run.
I know it got a bit of a little cult following. Like, I never liked the game, but yeah, that probably didn't help. Look, I like the idea of demos. Execution is an entirely different matter entirely.
But to be quite honest, I'm not entirely sure if people are fully willing to trust demos in the aftermath of what happened with Aliens Colonial Marines, and the fact that all of the promotional material was just one big lie.
Yeah, they've ruined a lot of good things. Like a lot of early access projects, I don't mind the idea of early access, but a lot of people kind of abused that, and now we can't have nice things anymore.
There's still plenty of really good early access. In fact, I even grabbed one recently in the form of Song of Conquest.
I generally won't grab it at early access, but if it looks good, I'll follow it and wait for it to get its full release. Like I did that with Crosscode.
There's enough with Song of Conquest that I felt it justified. And with some projects, I know that I'm going to be waiting a long time because it's a one-man thing, like say Harat.
Or what, V Rising I think looks really good.
I think if there's an overall coda with this, it's that do not take a black and white approach with this matter. You will only set yourself up to get ratioed if you do. There's a lot more moving parts and a lot more complications in a matter like this than some are willing to admit.
With that then, I think that pretty much wraps up the topic unless you got anything else to add.
I think we've thoroughly covered everything that we could cover in this matter. So, are we saying pirate everything? No, we are saying don't look at it as black and white.
What I am saying is you should pirate Bahamut Lagoon until that gets an actual release again, because that game is fantastic. Super Nintendo RPG, in case anyone has no idea what that game is.
If they don't know what it is, Google is your friend.
Yeah. Alright, and as normal, you'll be able to check out any of our other stuff. I'll have all the links to my written reviews in the comment section. You can check out Mildra and any of his tabletop or various other geek-related shows as well. And with that, enjoy your evening, and we'll see you next time.
Stay frosty.